Ambassador Taiwan adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform as he prepared to address the Galactic Council for the first time. The Great Hall of the Luminar Federation's central station stretched before him, its crystalline walls towering hundreds of meters overhead. The human delegation looked tiny compared to the various alien representatives seated in the curved chamber. Taiwan took a deep breath. At 45 years old, he had spent his career in Earth's diplomatic corps, but nothing had prepared him for representing humanity to the stars. Presenting Ambassador Taiwan of Earth, announced the Federation's protocol officer, a slender being with iridescent skin that pulsed with light as it spoke. Taiwan walked forward, acutely aware of the thousands of alien eyes tracking his movement. The gravity on the station was set slightly lighter than Earth's, making him feel as if he might accidentally bound too high with each step. Elder Kirix, the head of the council, leaned forward on his perch. The alien resembled a cross between a bird and an insect, with a great feathered crest and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's light in fractured patterns. When he spoke, his mandibles clicked softly. "Welcome, human representative. We have studied your world from afar for some time before making contact." Taiwan bowed respectfully. "We are honored to join the galactic community, Elder." Kirix tilted his massive head. "Your species evolved on what our scientists classify as a death world. The gravity of Earth is crushing by our standards. Your temperature variations would kill most sentient species. Your world teems with predators and natural disasters. It's remarkable you survived it all." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Taiwan noticed several delegates making what he assumed were gestures of pity or concern. "We adapted, Elder," Taiwan replied with a polite smile. "Humans are resilient." A tall, blue-skinned delegate rose. "Ambassador, our scans indicate humans possess only moderate physical strength, no natural weapons, poor sensory capabilities, and limited regenerative abilities. Yet you've survived on a planet that would kill most of us within hours. How?" Taiwan considered his answer carefully. "We compensate with ingenuity and cooperation, Counselor. And perhaps we're stronger than we appear." The council session continued for hours, with Taiwan fielding questions about Earth, human physiology, and cultural practices. Many delegates seemed fascinated but also somewhat condescending, as if humans were clever children who had somehow survived against impossible odds. After the formal proceedings, the Federation hosted a ceremonial feast to welcome the human delegation. The vast reception hall was filled with representatives from over 50 different species, mingling and sampling foods from across the galaxy. Taiwan and his team, scientists Ji Su and Da Hyun, along with cultural attaché Sung Ho, stayed together, accepting introductions and trying exotic refreshments deemed safe for human consumption. "They think we're fragile," whispered Ji Su as they watched a group of elephant-sized delegates delicately manipulating tiny utensils with prehensile tendrils. "Did you see how they reacted when you mentioned Earth's oxygen levels?" Da Hyun nodded. "Their scientists can't believe we evolved in what they consider poison." "Let them underestimate us," said Sung Ho. "It might be advantageous." Taiwan was about to respond when he noticed a strange odor in the air, sharp and acidic. Looking around, he saw thin wisps of greenish gas seeping from vents in the ceiling. Before he could react, alarms blared throughout the chamber. The alien delegates began to panic, some collapsing where they stood, others rushing for exits. "Atmospheric containment failure," came an automated announcement in multiple languages. "Toxic gas release detected. Evacuate immediately." Taiwan turned to his team. "Cover your mouths and noses. Help anyone you can reach." The humans pulled clothing over their faces and sprang into action. While most species fled or collapsed, the humans moved through the thickening gas, lifting fallen delegates and guiding them toward exits. Taiwan helped a small, trembling creature with 6 eyes to its feet. "This way," he urged, supporting its weight as they moved toward the door. In the monitoring center adjacent to the reception hall, Science Director Vornak and his team watched in astonishment through observation windows. The humans are still conscious, Vornak said in disbelief. That concentration of neurotoxin would paralyze any of our species within seconds. His assistant checked readings on a display. They should be dead. Their cellular structure should have collapsed by now. Inside the hall, Taiwan and his team continued working. The gas burned their eyes and lungs, but they had all experienced worse during their environmental training on Earth. They moved methodically, helping fallen delegates to safety. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The humans were still functioning. By the time emergency responders arrived with breathing apparatus, Taiwan's team had evacuated over 30 delegates. The humans finally accepted breathing masks, but only after ensuring all aliens were safe. Later, in the medical center, Taiwan sat patiently as Federation doctors examined him. "Remarkable," said the chief medical officer, a squid-like being named Dr. Zell. "Your lungs show irritation, but no permanent damage. Any of our species would have suffered complete respiratory failure. Earth's atmosphere has contained pollutants throughout much of our industrial development," Taiwan explained. "Humans have adapted to tolerate many toxins." Zell's tentacles waved in what might have been amazement. "You evolved on a planet where even the air tries to kill you." "Sometimes," Taiwan said with a small smile. That evening, the human delegation was summoned to Elder Kirix's private chambers. The Federation leader looked at them with new respect in his compound eyes. "You saved many lives today," Kirix said. "The Council is grateful." Taiwan bowed. "We only did what anyone would do." "But that's precisely the point, Ambassador. No one else could do what you did. We've always classified Earth as a death world based on its harsh conditions. We pitied your species, thinking you weak for having evolved in such a place." Kirix's mandibles clicked rapidly. "We were wrong. The death world didn't make you weak. It made you incredibly strong in ways we never anticipated. We're just human, Elder." "Yes," Kirix replied, "and we have much to learn about what that truly means." As they left the chamber, Sung Ho whispered to Taiwan, "I think we just got upgraded from helpless primitives to interesting primitives." Taiwan smiled. It was a start. In the days that followed, word spread throughout the Federation about the humans' actions. Delegates who had dismissed the newcomers now watched them with curiosity and growing respect. And in his private log, Science Director Vornak recorded a new observation. "The humans call their world Earth. We call it a death world. But perhaps we should consider another perspective. If humans can breathe toxins, endure crushing gravity, and survive temperature extremes that would kill most species, what does that make them in the greater galaxy? Perhaps not victims of a harsh world, but something much more significant. Survivors, adapted to conditions we can barely imagine. And that raises an important question. What else can they endure that we cannot?" Admiral Jeho stood before the tactical display, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic map showing Federation space. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the galactic community, and the political situation had deteriorated rapidly. The Admiral's dark eyes narrowed as he studied the encroaching red territory marking Draknar imperial expansion. "The Draknar Empire has seized 3 more systems," he announced to the assembled officers in the briefing room aboard the EDF Indomitable. "Teller Prime fell yesterday. Minimal resistance." The human officers exchanged grim looks. Commander Yunji, the tactical officer, stepped forward. At 38, she had served in Earth's defense forces for nearly 2 decades before transferring to the Joint Human Federation Command. "They targeted Novus Colony next," she said, pointing to a small blue dot near the contested border. The human settlement, only 3 years old, sat at a strategic junction between Federation space and the expanding empire. Population 7,000, mostly civilian researchers and agricultural specialists. Admiral Jeho nodded. "The colony has minimal defenses, 2 orbital platforms and a small ground force. Foreign Minister Su-min, who had joined the briefing via secure communication link from Federation headquarters, cleared his throat. The diplomat looked tired, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. "I've just come from an emergency council session," he said. "The Federation is sending only token support, a single medical frigate and 50 peacekeepers. They believe Novus will fall within days." Commander Yunja slammed her fist onto the table. 7,000 civilians. And they're just writing them off. "The Federation has never faced a military threat like this," Su-min explained. "Their species evolved in environments without significant predators or competition. For most of their history, conflict resolution meant displays and negotiation, not warfare." Admiral Jeho's voice dropped dangerously quiet. "Then they don't understand humans." He turned to his communications officer. "Contact Earth Defense Command. Request immediate deployment of the 3rd Fleet to Novus." "Sir," interrupted Captain Hunja, the Admiral's aide, "Earth Command hasn't authorized military intervention. The diplomatic corps is still negotiating our role in Federation defense." Jaiho's expression hardened. "Then I'll take full responsibility. Novus is a human colony, regardless of which star it orbits." The room fell silent as the officers contemplated the implications. Humanity had only just gained its place among the stars. Unilateral military action could jeopardize their standing with the Federation. "The Federation doesn't understand what they're facing," said Commander Yunji, breaking the silence. She activated a secondary display showing Draknar military formations. "The Empire isn't interested in displays or negotiations. They're predators. They sense weakness and exploit it." Foreign Minister Su-min looked troubled. "If we commit military assets without Federation approval, we risk our alliance. Many council members already fear human unpredictability. And if we do nothing, we prove ourselves unworthy allies," countered Jaiho. 7,000 humans will die, and the Federation will still fall, system by system." The Admiral made his decision. "Prepare jump coordinates for Novus. We depart in 6 hours." As the officers dispersed to their duties, Su-min requested a private channel with Jaiho. "You're risking everything, Admiral." Jaiho nodded. "Sometimes that's necessary, Minister. The Federation needs to see what humanity can do, what we will do, to protect our own and our allies." 3 days later, the Indomitable emerged from jump space on the far side of Novus, along with 4 Earth defense cruisers. They had bypassed the main travel lanes to avoid detection. On the bridge, Admiral Jaiho surveyed the tactical situation. Draknar warships, 15 massive vessels bristling with weapons, had formed a blockade around the planet. Ground forces had already begun landing operations. "The colony's main settlement is still holding," reported Commander Yunji. "They've activated emergency protocols and armed the civilian population." And the Federation response. "The medical frigate is maintaining position at the edge of the system. They're unwilling to approach the combat zone." Jaiho wasn't surprised. The peaceful species of the Federation had never developed the human capacity for warfare. Their technology was advanced, but their tactics and will to fight were not. "Open a channel to the colony," he ordered. Governor Sanha's face appeared on screen, her expression strained but determined. Smoke and emergency lighting were visible in the background. "Admiral, thank the stars. We thought we'd been abandoned." "Never," Jaiho replied firmly. "What's your status?" "We've lost the northern quadrant, but we're holding the central city and spaceport. Civilians are in underground shelters. The Draknar didn't expect resistance. They thought we'd surrender immediately." The governor's expression hardened. "These aren't warriors, Admiral. They're bullies who've never faced an opponent that fights back." Jaiho nodded approvingly. "Hold position. We're implementing Operation Thunderbolt." "The Federation hasn't authorized military intervention," Sanha cautioned. "We're not waiting for permission to save human lives," Jaiho responded, "or to teach the galaxy what happens when you threaten a Deathworlder colony. The communication ended, and Jiho turned to his bridge crew. Deploy our fighters. Target their command vessels and landing craft. Ground teams prepare for immediate deployment. As Earth's forces engaged, the Federation observation vessel watched in stunned silence. The humans fought with an intensity and coordination the peaceful species had never witnessed. Fighter craft executed maneuvers that seemed physically impossible, pilots withstanding forces that would kill most species. Ground teams dropped directly into combat zones, using the planet's higher-than-average gravity to their advantage. On the Indomitable's bridge, Jiho received an incoming transmission from the Federation observer, a luminar named Trell. Admiral, what you're doing violates protocol. The Council hasn't authorized. With respect, Observer Trell, I don't need authorization to defend human lives. Jiho interrupted. You can court-martial me later if we survive. But the Draknar forces outnumber you 3-1. Jiho allowed himself a grim smile. Numbers aren't everything. As the battle progressed, the Federation observers watched in amazement. Human soldiers fought continuously for hours without rest. Their bodies, evolved on a high-gravity world with high oxygen content, demonstrated endurance far beyond what the Federation species could maintain. When wounded, they continued fighting. When outmatched, they adapted tactics instantly. By the second day, 3 Draknar warships had been disabled, and their ground forces were in retreat from the colony's main settlement. The Empire, used to easy victories against the peaceful Federation worlds, had not prepared for the ferocity of human resistance. In his private quarters, Admiral Jiho received a direct communication from Federation headquarters. Elder Kirix himself appeared on screen. Admiral, the alien's mandibles clicked rapidly, indicating distress. Your intervention was not sanctioned. No, it wasn't, Jiho agreed calmly. Yet you've achieved what our analysts thought impossible. The Draknar are withdrawing from Novus. Jiho nodded. Humans protect our own, Elder. And we will protect our allies with equal determination, if given the chance. Kirix was silent for a moment. The Council is reconsidering its defense strategy. Perhaps we have been too quick to dismiss human military expertise. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day, Elder. We learned to fight back. After the communication ended, Commander Yunjie entered with the latest battle reports. The colony is secure. Draknar forces are in full retreat. Jiho nodded. And the Federation observers. Requesting permission to interview our troops about their combat techniques, she said with a small smile. It seems they're finally beginning to understand what humans are capable of. They've only seen the beginning, Jiho replied quietly. This storm is just gathering strength. The Draknar warships hung in the sky like massive dark predators, their hulls reflecting no light as they positioned themselves above Novus colony. From their observation bunker on the colony's eastern ridge, Federation observers Tiller and Vriz watched with growing concern. The bunker, reinforced with local materials, gave them a clear view of the human settlement and the gathering Imperial forces. Tiller, whose translucent blue skin pulsed with anxiety, adjusted the recording equipment. His species, the Melfori, were natural diplomats, evolved to sense emotional states across species boundaries. What he sensed from the approaching Draknar terrified him. The Imperial commander has issued another surrender demand, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Their ground forces are landing in the northern quadrant now. Vriz, a stockier being with protective scales and 6 eyes positioned for maximum visual coverage, checked their communication equipment. As a Korthi, his species specialized in observation and analysis. Why don't they surrender? Taylor whispered, watching human colonists continuing to prepare defenses. They're outnumbered 20-1. Through the bunker's viewport, they could see Captain Hejun directing civilian defense preparations. The human officer, a veteran of Earth conflicts who had retired to Novus to lead its small security force, moved with calm efficiency as Imperial dropships continued to land troops beyond the colony perimeter. Admiral Jaiho's fleet has been driven back, said Vriz, reviewing the latest communications. The Draknar brought reinforcements. The humans are on their own now. Below them, the colony hummed with activity. Unlike the panic that had consumed other Federation outposts attacked by the Empire, the humans moved with purpose. Even those who weren't security personnel carried tools, materials, and in many cases, improvised weapons. "Look at them," said Taylor. "They know they can't win. Why fight?" Vriz's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "I don't understand either. The logical response would be to evacuate or surrender." As darkness fell on the first day, the two observers expected the fighting to cease. Instead, they watched in amazement as human teams moved through the shadows toward Imperial positions. Captain Hejun led one of these teams, carrying minimal equipment but moving with deadly purpose. Are they attacking? Tiller couldn't believe what he was seeing. At night, without heavy weapons, the answer came in the form of explosions and weapons fire at the Imperial front line. The humans had somehow bypassed the Draknar's forward positions and struck directly at their command posts. Before the Imperials could mount an organized response, the human fighters had disappeared. "Impossible," whispered Vriz, all 6 eyes wide. "The Draknar have thermal imaging and motion sensors." The humans went underground. Teller realized, checking his scanner. There's a network of tunnels. They must have prepared them in advance. Throughout the night, these hit-and-run attacks continued. By morning, the Imperial forces had pulled back, regrouping after their unexpected losses. Vriz sent a detailed report to Federation Command. The response was disbelief mixed with concern. No colony had ever repelled a Draknar attack before. The Federation analysts suspected the human observers were exaggerating. "They don't believe us," Vriz told Taylor after reading the response. "They think we're mistaken about the humans' capabilities." On the second day, the Draknar launched a full frontal assault. Armored vehicles and infantry pushed toward the colony's main entrance in overwhelming numbers. The humans had established defensive barriers, but these seemed pitifully inadequate against Imperial war machines. "It's over," said Taylor sadly. "They fought bravely, but—" His words died as he watched the human response unfold. Rather than cowering behind their barriers, the colonists engaged in coordinated defense that utilized the terrain and their knowledge of the settlement's layout. They channeled the Imperial forces into prepared kill zones, used the colony's water reclamation system to flood areas where enemy troops concentrated, and triggered hidden explosive devices that disabled the largest Imperial vehicles. Most shocking to the Federation observers was the humans' physical endurance. When a Draknar energy weapon struck a human defender, the wounded colonist often continued fighting. They saw one woman take a blast to her shoulder, yet she kept firing her weapon with her uninjured arm. A man with a clearly broken leg splinted it himself and returned to his position. How are they still standing? Tiller couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Their bodies should be in shock. By the third day, the pattern became clearer. The Imperial forces, despite their superior numbers and technology, were becoming disorganized. The humans fought with a tenacity that the Draknar had never encountered. Captain Hejun's militia fighters emerged from underground tunnels at night, attacked with precision, then disappeared before a response could be mounted. Most disturbing to the Draknar commanders was the humans' ability to adapt. When the Imperials adjusted to the night attacks, the humans changed tactics. When the Draknar deployed sonic weapons designed to incapacitate, the humans stuffed simple materials in their ears and kept fighting. Vriz watched through high-powered optics as a human fighter with visible wounds was briefly treated at a medical station. 15 minutes later, that same human returned to the front line. "They're not stopping." Vriz transmitted to Federation Command, his message urgent. "The humans, they don't tire. They don't break. Even their children are helping build barricades. I've never seen anything like it." On the afternoon of the third day, the Federation observers were startled when their bunker door opened. Captain Hejun entered, his uniform stained with blood and dirt, a makeshift bandage wrapped around his forearm. "You should relocate to the central shelter," he told them, his voice calm despite the chaos outside. "The Draknar have changed tactics. They're targeting non-combatant structures now." Tiller stared at the human captain. "You're injured. Shouldn't you be resting?" Hajum glanced at his bandaged arm, as if noticing it for the first time. "It's just a flesh wound. I've had worse." "But how can you continue fighting in that condition?" Tiller asked. The human gave a small smile. "This is nothing. On Earth, I once had to march 30 kilometers with a bullet in my leg. This is just a scratch." Vriz's multiple eyes focused on the captain. "Your people fight beyond normal physiological limits." "How?" Hajum considered the question. "Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. Predators, diseases, natural disasters. We survived them all. Pain is just information. Sometimes you can ignore it when something more important is at stake." "What could be more important than personal survival?" Tiller asked, genuinely confused. "The survival of others," Hajum answered simply. "Our families. Our community. There are children in this colony. We'll die before we let the Draknar reach them." After the captain left, the two Federation observers packed their equipment in silence. As they made their way toward the central shelter, they witnessed scenes that would forever change their understanding of humans. Elderly colonists who could no longer fight were manufacturing ammunition. Children too young for combat were carrying water and supplies to defenders. A medical station operated in what had been a school, where wounded fighters received minimal treatment before insisting on returning to battle. Most remarkable was the absence of fear. The colonists were not fighting in panic or desperation. They fought with grim determination, their actions coordinated and purposeful. By sunset on the third day, something unprecedented happened. The Draknar forces began to withdraw, not in a tactical repositioning, but in what appeared to be a full retreat. "They're leaving," Vriz said in disbelief, watching through his optical enhancers as Imperial troops boarded their transports. From the command center, now relocated to an underground bunker, they heard human colonists cheering. Captain Hajum's voice came over the colony-wide communication system. "They've had enough for now. Stay vigilant. This isn't over." Later that evening, in their new shelter, Teller composed a final report to Federation Command. "The human colony at Novus has done what we thought impossible. They have repelled a Draknar invasion force through a combination of tactics we've never observed. Their physical endurance exceeds anything in our records. They continue fighting despite injuries that would incapacitate any Federation species. Most significantly, they display a collective resolve that the Draknar were unprepared for. I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood our human allies. They are not merely survivors of a harsh world. They are being shaped by that harshness into something formidable. The Draknar Empire has never retreated from an invasion before today. I recommend immediate reassessment of humanity's role in Federation defense strategy." As he sent the transmission, Teller looked at Vriz. "Do you think they'll believe us now?" Vriz's eyes blinked in sequence. "They must. What we've witnessed here changes everything we thought we knew about warfare and about humans." Outside, Captain Hajun walked among his fighters, checking wounds, offering encouragement, and already planning for the next phase. The colonists had survived the first assault, but he knew the Empire would return with greater force. Next time, though, they would find not just a colony of civilians, but a population awakened to its own strength, Deathworlders who had discovered what they were truly capable of. The 5th Human Expeditionary Force arrived without fanfare. 15 unmarked vessels slipped through the darkness of space, their stealth systems rendering them nearly invisible against the backdrop of stars. They moved in perfect formation, avoiding the established jump routes where Draknar patrol ships maintained their blockade of Orion Station. On the bridge of the command vessel Silent Thunder, Colonel Yuna studied the tactical display. At 42, she was among Earth's most decorated special operations commanders. with experience fighting in environments ranging from deep ocean trenches to the thin atmosphere of Martian outposts. The mission to liberate Orion Station would test even her considerable skills. Imperial forces have established complete control of the outer docking rings, reported her second-in-command, Major Bin. The station's Federation crew is contained in the central hub. Life support to non-essential areas has been cut to force their surrender. Yuna nodded, her expression calm despite the dire situation. Standard Imperial tactics. They expect their opponents to fear death more than captivity. A small smile crossed her face. That works well against most species in the Federation. Less so against humans. The colonel turned to the communications officer. Signal the fleet. Commence Operation Shadowfall in 30 minutes. As the human vessels moved into position around the massive space station, Yuna prepared to brief the small contingent of Federation allies who had joined the mission. Most Federation species had declined to participate, believing the station already lost. The briefing room was arranged to accommodate the various physiologies of their alien allies. A towering Lumar diplomat stood awkwardly in the corner, while 3 Korthi observers huddled together, their six-eyed faces betraying anxiety. Only the Volari Commandos, a rare militaristic species within the Federation, appeared comfortable. Orion Station is a critical supply hub. Yuna began, activating the holographic display of the station. Its loss would cripple Federation operations in this sector. The Draknar know this. They've committed significant forces to hold it. She highlighted different sections of the station. We'll divide into strike teams. Alpha Team will secure the primary life support systems. Beta will target their command center. Gamma will evacuate Federation personnel. The Lumar diplomat, Kelmer, raised one of his 4 limbs. Colonel, our intelligence suggests the Draknar have at least 800 troops aboard. Your force numbers only 300. Numbers aren't everything in confined spaces, Yuna replied. My troops can operate for 72 hours without sleep if necessary. We've trained for these conditions. Kelmer's compound eyes widened. Without sleep. For 3 days? If necessary, Yuna repeated. Human physiology allows us to function under extreme sleep deprivation when required. It's not pleasant, but it's possible. The Volari commander, Tark, nodded with respect. My people can manage 24 hours at most before combat effectiveness drops below acceptable levels. We'll pair your forces with ours for the first day, Yuna said. After that, your teams can rotate to support roles while we maintain the front lines. As the briefing continued, Yuna detailed the assault plan. The Federation representatives grew increasingly uncomfortable as she described tactics that would be considered unthinkable by their standards. You plan to deliberately expose sections to vacuum? Asked Kelmer, horrified. What about your own troops? All human soldiers are vacuum trained, Yuna explained. We can function in zero pressure for up to 90 seconds without permanent damage. The Draknar have no such training. Security Chief Do Hyun, who would lead Gamma Team, added, We'll wear internal breathers that provide an oxygen reserve. That gives us a significant advantage in sections exposed to vacuum. As the Federation observers exchanged troubled glances, Yuna continued outlining the plan. She knew they found human tactics disturbing, but she also knew that conventional approaches had failed against the Draknar. The Empire has never faced Deathworlders in combat, she concluded. They don't understand what we're capable of. That's our edge. The attack began exactly as planned. The 15 human vessels simultaneously launched their assault craft, targeting different access points around the station. While the Draknar rushed to defend the main docking ports, special operations teams burned through the hull at maintenance access points, entering the station through routes the Imperials considered impassable. Security Chief Do Hyun led his team through a narrow maintenance shaft, moving in zero gravity with practiced ease. Unlike the bulky armored suits of the Draknar, human combat gear was designed for flexibility and endurance. Even in vacuum, they could maneuver with precision. Central Hub is 12 sections ahead, Du-hyun told his team through their comm system. Imperial forces are concentrated in Sections 7 and 9. Lieutenant Sunma, the team's technical specialist, studied her scanner. Life support is actively pumping atmosphere into those sections. They're using it to maintain pressure barriers. Do-hyun smiled behind his helmet. Perfect. Proceed to Junction 5B, prepare breaching charges. When they reached the junction, Do-hyun's team placed shake charges precisely where three main corridors met. At his signal, they magnetized their boots to secure themselves to the deck. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. The charges detonated silently in the vacuum of the maintenance shaft. Nearby bulkhead doors, designed to contain atmosphere in emergencies, failed to close quickly enough. The sudden decompression created a violent rush of air from the pressurized sections where Draknar troops were stationed. Imperial soldiers, unprepared for explosive decompression, were pulled toward the breach. Some managed to grab handholds, but many were swept into vacuum, their bulky armor becoming a liability in zero gravity. Do-hyun and his team launched themselves through the breach, using the chaotic environment to their advantage. While the Draknar struggled to stabilize themselves, the humans moved with purpose, firing targeted shots at Imperial command personnel. In the station's central hub, Orion's Federation crew had barricaded themselves behind emergency barriers. When human forces cut through to their position, many were shocked to see their rescuers. "We thought no one would come," said the station's Nulfori administrator, tears forming in his large eyes. The Federation Council deemed the station lost. "Humans don't leave people behind," Do-hyun replied simply, organizing the evacuation. Throughout the station, similar scenes played out. Colonel Yuna's strategic use of environmental controls turned the station itself into a weapon. Sections were vented to vacuum, gravity was manipulated to disorient Imperial troops, and temperature controls were overridden to create conditions intolerable to Draknar physiology, but merely uncomfortable for humans. During the most intense fighting near the station's core, a Draknar heavy weapons team deployed plasma cannons. 3 humans from Do-hyun's squad were caught in the blast, suffering serious burns that melted portions of their combat suits to their skin. The Federation observer Kelmar, who had accompanied Do-hyun as a liaison, expected the injured humans to be evacuated immediately. Instead, he watched in shock as medical personnel applied emergency sealant to the wounds. The injured soldiers received pain suppressors and stimulants, then rejoined the fight. "They should be unconscious from pain," Kelmar transmitted to his superiors. "The burns penetrated to muscle tissue, yet they're still functioning." One of the injured humans, Sergeant Kyung, noticed Kelmar's distress. Despite the obvious pain written across his face, he paused briefly to explain. "Pain suppression training," he said through gritted teeth, "started in Earth's Special Forces, now standard for all expeditionary troops. We learned to compartmentalize pain, treat it as information rather than a debilitating force." "But why continue fighting when wounded?" Kelmar couldn't comprehend it. "Because the mission isn't complete," Kyung answered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Then he rejoined his team, moving forward despite his injuries. By the 30-hour mark, Draknar resistance began to crumble. The Imperial forces, accustomed to quick victories against Federation worlds, had no protocol for an enemy that seemed impervious to normal limitations. Human troops operated in environmental conditions the Draknar considered lethal, continued fighting despite injuries, and showed no signs of fatigue despite the continuous combat. From the command center, now secured by Alpha Team, Colonel Yuna coordinated the final push to clear the station. "The remaining Imperial forces are retreating to their vessels," reported Major Bin. "Station control systems are back in our hands." Yuna nodded, showing no signs of fatigue despite having been awake for over 40 hours. "Begin repairs to critical systems. Establish a defense perimeter in case they attempt to retake the station." In his observation post, Kelmar composed his report to Federation Command. His hands trembled slightly as he recorded what he had witnessed. "They're not just soldiers," he reported, struggling to find words to convey what he had seen. There's something evolved from nightmare conditions, and they're winning. He paused, then continued with growing conviction. The humans fight in ways we cannot comprehend. They continue despite injuries that would incapacitate our species. They function in environments we consider immediately lethal. Most importantly, they do not break under pressure. They seem to grow stronger. Kelmar looked across the command center, where Colonel Yuna was already planning the next phase of operations to push back Imperial forces in the sector. The Draknar Empire has never encountered a species like this, he concluded his report. For the first time since the invasion began, I believe the Federation may survive, not because of our technology or our diplomacy, but because we have allied ourselves with Deathworlders who bring capabilities we never imagined possible. As human medical teams treated the wounded and engineering crews repaired station systems, Du Hyun found a moment to speak with Kelmar. Your people fought well today, the observer said, making an effort to understand these strange allies. Do Hyun shook his head. We haven't shown you real fighting yet. This was just a skirmish. Just a skirmish. Kelmar couldn't hide his shock. You lost 17 personnel. Many more are wounded. And we took back a station the Federation considered lost, against an enemy that outnumbered us nearly 3-1. Du Hyun replied. The counterattack has only begun. As if to emphasize his point, alerts sounded throughout the station. Colonel Yuna's voice came over the communication system. All personnel, prepare for deployment. Phase 2 commences in 6 hours. Kelmar watched the human troops respond, moving with purpose despite their exhaustion and injuries. For the first time since the Draknar invasion began, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. The Federation Council chamber fell silent as General Min Seo stood before the assembled representatives of 57 spacefaring civilizations. The massive circular room, with its soaring crystalline dome that showed the stars above, had never been so quiet. Even the typically chattering Volari delegates watched in hushed attention. Min Seo, a veteran of Earth's most challenging military campaigns, stood straight in her formal uniform. At 62, her face showed the lines of experience, but her eyes remained sharp and focused. Behind her, a tactical display showed the current state of the war against the Draknar Empire, a war that had seemed hopeless just 6 months earlier. The Empire has lost 27 systems in the past 90 days, Min Seo stated, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Their forces are stretched thin defending their core worlds. For the first time, they face an enemy they cannot simply overwhelm. Elder Kyrix, his feathered crest raised in what humans had learned was an expression of respect, leaned forward. And your assessment of the final phase, General. Min Seo gestured to the display, where a complex series of attack vectors converged on the Draknar home system. Operation Daybreak will target their remaining shipyards and command centers simultaneously. By striking at multiple points, we prevent them from concentrating their forces. She paused, looking directly at the council members. This will not be a peaceful operation. The Empire will defend its core worlds with everything it has. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Many Federation species had never known true warfare before the Draknar invasion. The concept of a direct assault on an enemy's homeworld troubled them deeply. There are civilian populations on those worlds, noted the Melfori representative, his translucent skin pulsing with concern. Min Seo nodded, which is why each strike team includes human tactical specialists paired with Federation diplomats. Our goal is to force surrender with minimal civilian casualties. Elder Kyrix raised his wing-like appendage for silence. The council chamber grew quiet once more. Humans will take point on all major engagements, he announced, to murmured agreement from the other council members. We recognize now what your Deathworld evolution has created. Min Seo bowed slightly in acknowledgement. We accept this responsibility. Later, in a private meeting room, Ambassador Ta-Won joined Min Seo and Admiral Ji-ho to review the council's decision. It's remarkable, Taiwan said, still processing the outcome. A year ago, they viewed us as fragile curiosities from a hostile planet. Now they're entrusting us with the defense of the entire Federation. Jaiho's expression remained serious. They've seen what we can do. At Novus Colony, at Orion Station, at the Battle of Centauri, they've witnessed humanity's capabilities. They've also seen our restraint, added Mincio. That's equally important. We could have used more destructive tactics, but we chose precision instead. Taiwan nodded. The Federation species evolved in gentle environments. Conflict for them meant displays and posturing, rarely direct combat. They don't understand warfare, but they understand protection. And that's why they've accepted our leadership, Jaiho concluded. They recognize that Earth's challenges created in us not just the ability to fight, but the understanding of when fighting is necessary. Operation Daybreak launched 3 weeks later. Human battle cruisers led the charge into Drakkar space, accompanied by Federation vessels providing technical and medical support. The Empire's defenders, accustomed to easy victories against peaceful species, found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Captain Hana and her Special Operations team infiltrated the Drakkar military headquarters on Krell, the Empire's primary command world. Wearing environmental suits designed to mimic Drakkar life signs, they moved through the sprawling complex with practiced stealth. "Security hub ahead," whispered Lieutenant Jun, the team's technology specialist. 3 guards. Hana signaled to her team. They moved with silent efficiency, neutralizing the guards without lethal force. Jun accessed the security systems, looping surveillance feeds to hide their presence. "Command center is 2 levels down," he reported. "Approximately 20 Imperial officers present, including High Commander Vexkar." Hana nodded. "Perfect. Deploy the neural disruptors. Remember, we want them incapacitated, not dead." When the team breached the command center minutes later, the Drakkar officers had no time to respond. The human-designed neural disruptors, calibrated specifically to Drakkar physiology, rendered them unconscious within seconds. Lieutenant Jun immediately accessed the command systems. "I've gained control of their defense network. Transmitting shutdown codes now." Across the Drakkar system, planetary defense platforms went offline. Orbital weapons arrays powered down. The Empire's fearsome military machine began to falter as human teams executed similar precision strikes against key targets. On the bridge of the EDF Indomitable, Admiral Jaiho watched as reports flowed in from the various battlefronts. "All primary objectives secured," reported his tactical officer. "Minimal casualties on both sides." Jaiho nodded with satisfaction. "Signal General Mincio. Phase 2 can commence." Phase 2 involved something no one in the Federation would have considered possible: direct communication with the Drakkar Emperor. For generations, the Imperial leadership had operated from the shadows, issuing commands through military proxies. No diplomatic contact had ever succeeded. But the humans had studied Drakkar psychology, culture, and physiology. They understood what the Federation species did not, that the Empire responded only to demonstrations of strength followed by mercy. In the Imperial throne room on the Drakkar homeworld, Emperor Zorax found himself facing a situation without precedent. His military command structure had been decapitated in a series of precise strikes. His fleet was scattered and directionless. And now, standing before him, were representatives of the species his forces had dismissed as weak just months earlier. General Mincio, wearing formal Earth Defense Force dress uniform, stood alongside Ambassador Taiwan. Behind them, a small honor guard of human soldiers maintained perfect stillness, despite the higher gravity and sulfur-rich atmosphere of the Drakkar world. "Your empire is finished," Mincio stated simply. "We control your defense systems, your communication networks, and your command structure." Emperor Zorax, his scaled skin flushed with the Drakkar equivalent of rage, rose from his ornate throne. "You dare dictate terms to the Eternal Empire. We offer choices, corrected Tadwan, his diplomatic training evident in his measured tone. Surrender with honor, and your people will be treated fairly. Continue fighting, and you will lose everything. We can destroy your civilization, Zorax hissed. We have done it before to others. Min Seo stepped forward, her expression calm but resolute. You misunderstand, Emperor. We are not like the others. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. Our bodies and minds were shaped by challenges your species never faced. She gestured to the humans standing behind her. Each soldier here can function in environments you consider lethal. They can fight without rest for days. They can endure injuries that would kill your warriors instantly. We could have bombarded your worlds from orbit, added Tadwan. Instead, we chose precision. That choice can be withdrawn. The Emperor studied the humans with new understanding. For the first time in the history of the Draknar Empire, Zorax recognized an adversary that could not be intimidated or overwhelmed. 3 hours later, when the Draknar Emperor finally surrendered, he addressed not the Federation diplomats but the human commanders. We never understood what we were fighting, he admitted, his voice carrying to all corners of the throne room. Your species doesn't just survive. You thrive in conditions that would kill most life forms. The surrender ceremony was broadcast throughout Federation space. Species that had lived in fear of the Draknar for generations watched in amazement as the once mighty empire accepted terms of peace. The humans, newcomers to the galactic community, had accomplished what had seemed impossible. Months later, as the Federation began the long process of rebuilding, Ambassador Tadwan hosted a delegation of council members on Earth. The diplomatic schedule included a tour of major cities, cultural landmarks, and natural wonders. But it was a simple park in Seoul that made the most profound impression on the visitors. Tadwan watched as Elder Kirix and other Federation delegates observed human children playing. The youngsters climbed trees, tumbled down hills, and picked themselves up after falling without concern. They are so small, remarked Kirix, his voice filled with wonder. Yet they challenge themselves constantly. They take risks that seem unnecessary. A young girl nearby fell from a swing, scraped her knee, wiped away a tear, and immediately returned to play. The Federation representatives watched in amazement. Now I understand, Elder Kirix said quietly. You became strong not to conquer, but to protect. Your death world forged you not into monsters, but guardians. Taiwan nodded. That's humanity's true power. We face challenges so that others don't have to. We endure hardship to protect those we care about. As the delegation continued their tour, reports arrived from across Federation space. Former Draknar territories were stabilizing under joint administration. Trade routes closed by the war had reopened. Species that had hidden in fear now emerged to join the galactic community. In the newly established Federation Defense Academy, human instructors worked alongside representatives from other species, sharing knowledge and techniques. The peaceful Federation had not become warlike, but it had learned the value of strength and resilience. On the final evening of the delegation's visit, a celebration was held at the Federation Embassy in Seoul. Representatives from all member species gathered to commemorate the new era of cooperation. General Min Seo, now serving as the first human appointed to lead the Federation's unified defense forces, raised a glass in toast. To the stars we share, she said, and to the understanding that true strength comes not from domination, but from protection. Elder Kirix extended his wing-like appendage in the traditional Luminar gesture of deepest respect. To our Deathworld guardians, he replied, may we never forget what you have taught us. Across the hall, Ambassador Taiwan watched the gathering with quiet satisfaction. Humanity had found its place among the stars not by conquering or intimidating, but by demonstrating the qualities forged through millennia of evolution on their challenging world: resilience, adaptability, and the unshakable determination to protect not just themselves, but all those under their care. The Deathworlders had ascended not to rule, but to serve as the guardians the galaxy never knew it needed.